Hi, everybody, and thank you for your patience. We're going to do this as a bit of a tag team presentation. So we're going to be switching places a little bit and telling you about some of the research that we have done in illusions and our interest in illusions and what they tell us both about the brain and also as tools of critical thinking. Because if we understand our challenges and our limitations, then we will be all much better prepared to deal with the political environment right now in this alternative facts and post-truth era. We need to understand what's going on in the brain, how our perception can be different from reality. And what we need to understand is that, for one, we think there's a reality out there, but we cannot be sure, of course. But most importantly for this discussion is that we do not perceive this reality directly. Every feeling, every sensation, every thought is the product of our neural hardware and software. So we don't have a direct experience of reality. Everything is mediated by our brain. And what we call illusions are the cases in which we have a great discrepancy between our perception and the reality that is out there. But it's important to realize that almost never, perhaps never at all, we have a perfect correspondence. So most or perhaps all of our experience is to a degree illusory. Now, Steve and I have for the last 13 years organized a competition that we call the Best Illusion of the Year contest. And in this competition, artists, perceptual scientists, graphic designers, and so on submit their best illusion creations, and every year there's a competition to choose the top 10, and out of the top 10, the best illusion of the year. So we're going to show you a few examples of illusions that have competed in the contest to just tell you what we mean about this field. And I'd like to start with an illusion from a few years ago. And what I'd like you to do here is to keep your eyes on the cross. You're going to see a number of faces from famous people, but you need to stay fixated on the central cross and pay attention to these pictures. And just in a few seconds, you'll see that they become very, very horrible, very deformed. This is not a computer trick. These are the exact same pictures of these people that you all know and love. Look at the pictures directly, and you will see that they are gorgeous as you know them. Go back to the cross, stay fixated, and again, they become not so pretty anymore. So this is an illusion that you're producing in your minds right now. And it tells you, one of the fundamental things that it tells you about our brain is that everything is relative. Everything depends on what you compare it to, and you're making these comparisons all the time, in real time, incredibly fast speed. The reason this illusion works is because all of these faces are being aligned one after the other. So as fast as they're presented, your brain is saying, okay, so this person that actually has a normal sized nose is happening. I'm seeing this person right after somebody that had a short nose. So I'm going to exaggerate the comparison. So this nose is going to look very big to me, and so on. And we're constantly looking and making this comparison. So nothing is absolute. Even beauty is not an absolute concept.
Okay, so not only do things happen in faces, but just in simple objects. So here you see two circles in the center there. They seem different sizes. And if we now take a circle and just show you something growing, nothing happens to it. But if we put the circle in the center of the field of dots that are growing, you'll see that it actually changes size a little bit as those circles grow. But if we actually move that dot at the same time, so we move the entire field, you'll see in your peripheral vision something very striking happens. So stay fixated here, and as this moves, now the circle in the center seems to grow and shrink in a very big way, where in fact it's not changing at all. It really is just happening in your mind, and this has to do with the way that you compare things as they move across your visual scene. So, so in this illusion, we have 16 door panels. Now this has been a viral illusion in the last few weeks on the internet. And it's actually not 16 door panels. This was actually invented by Tony Norsha from Smith Kettlewell Institute and premiered in our contest in 2006. In fact, there are 16 circles here. There are no squares. Raise your hand if you see circles, and raise your hand if you see squares. Okay, yeah, by squares. Now I mean it. There are no circles. There are no squares here. If I show you the circles, they're going to pop out. Okay, and I want to hear a really big gasping response. Okay, watch this. Now there's circles, right? Thank you, Tony. Thank you. So this is incredible. So how does this happen? Well, what's happening here is your brain is interpreting the way these lines interact as shadows, okay? And so your brain tends to see things, interpreting them as three-dimensional objects in the world, which is how you evolved. And it interprets that there's going to be shadows on three-dimensional objects. And so it's imposing this structure on everything you see. And so you're seeing something that's not there instead of seeing something that's actually there, which is horizontal lines in circular shape and vertical lines as a background is what's actually there. But your brain is trying to seek the three-dimensional structure into it. Now this is what's happening, for example, at a cognitive level. This kind of thing is what's happening when you have a religious epiphany, okay, as well. So this is exactly one of the reasons that we have this kind of study of the brain, is to understand not only how we see but how we cognate as well. All right, so here's another famous illusion, the cafe wall illusion that recently went viral. You'll see in these bricks here that there are slanted lines, okay, and they're all actually rectilinear and parallel. But you'll see slanted lines here. This is a classic illusion now, and this comes from this particular cafe in Bristol was where it was discovered. And you can see what's happening here is that the grout between the bricks is actually a medium color between the white and the black bricks. Now, Victoria Sky recently has taken this to a very powerful extent and developed this illusion, which takes the interplay of the black and the white and the grout and takes it to a very strong conclusion where these blue lines look really like they're not parallel at all. Okay, these blue lines look like they're very slanted, when in fact it's actually completely parallel. Now the way this works is at the top here you can see the cafe wall illusion. Now if we take the grout and we make it all black, you see in the center that it's very highly reduced how much that they look slanted. And if you make them white on the bottom, it also is reduced how slanted they are. It's really just in the top when you have the medium color. And this has to do with the way we see shading again. It's called the twisted chord illusion, and it's the way that we're interpreting light falling from the sky. And in nature, this generally doesn't happen, so it hasn't affected us evolutionarily to see this as a certain slant. It's how we interpret things in reality. Okay, so another brightness illusion here. Here we have chess pieces from Anderson and Winower, and you can see the white chess pieces on the top and the black chess pieces on the bottom. Now, the fact is that these chess pieces on the top and the bottom are actually completely identical. So the king on the top and the king on the bottom are pixel by pixel exactly the same image, okay? I'm going to prove that to you, but if I just take away the background, you'll see they're exactly the same image. Okay? It's not that they're similar, they're exactly the same. And if I just replace the background again, you see that one looks black and one looks white. And again, this is because our visual system is interpreting things in terms of the relative brightness. And so if we change things in a certain way, one thing will look like it's black versus white, even though it's exactly the same. Now, here's another illusion that's similar. We have two towers of Pisa, one's leaning more than the other. The one on the right leans more, but in fact, they're not. In fact, the one on the right and the one on the left, they're identical photographs, okay? Now the way this could happen is, imagine that when you evolved through time, it was under sunlight and it was looking at real three-dimensional objects in the real world. And if you were standing at the bottom of a tower, say a tree, you'd look up at it, and if you had two parallel trees, they would actually converge in the distance, with distance, okay? They would actually converge. But that's not happening in two photographs that are identical. You're looking at two objects that are moving away from you and leaning away from you in the distance, but they're not converging, okay, geometrically like they would in the real world on your retina. Okay? So what's happening here with these photographs is, because they're not converging, your brain is saying, oh, since they don't come together in the distance as they move away from me, it must be that they're really diverging. And so your brain is imposing on you the idea that these things are actually separated from each other and non-parallel, when in fact they physically are. Okay, so this is a movie. I'm not sure how to start this on the screen. Okay, so this is a similar illusion. Here we have three roads that you see. The two on the left are parallel, and I got it confused. The two on the right are parallel, and God damn it! Oh, you can't say that in an atheist conversation. Which one of these are parallel again? I can't remember. Can you tell me? Oh, those two have to be parallel, and that means that the other one that's obviously parallel now is. Oh, Jesus Christ! I give up. So again, your brain sees things differently. Your brain is used to seeing things as a two-dimensional image on your retina. That's the only way it could possibly see anything, because you only have two-dimensional retinas. Every single thing that moves away from you or looks three-dimensional in the distance, every single thing, whether it's looking in one eye or both eyes, is a function of interpretation of an image on a two-dimensional retina. And so by understanding those rules and perspectives, we can actually better understand how the brain actually sees things, objects in the distance. Now this is a movie. Okay, so here we have a movie by Kokichi Sugihara from our contest, and he showed that objects can roll uphill, and he did this with wood and cork to prove that they're not magnets. Okay? And you can see these objects rolling uphill, right? When in fact they're not really rolling uphill, they're really rolling downhill, but it has to do with your perspective. And let me show you what I mean. If we now just take this, these and turn them to a different perspective, you can see that this is really a sculptural depiction, that it's an illusion that only works from one perspective in the world. And if you have an accidental viewing perspective, you will see everything wrong, okay? That's something to keep in mind when you're arguing a specific perspective, okay? So let's try another one. This one here is from last year's contest. Same author, Kokichi Sugihara, and here he takes an object. That's a real mirror, and there are no computer graphic effects here, okay? So what is going on? There's circles on the top, and there's, wait, God, Jesus. Okay, now he turns it around again. You just saw what happened, right? It's very clear. He just showed you, right? He just 3D printed these up, and he's like, okay, how far can I push this? Well, let's make them cross, right? What if we take an object and on the top they're separate and on the bottom they're mixed and a completely different shape? Okay, that's a mirror. Okay, so how does this work? Anybody? That's right. You're completely crazy. All right, now. Here we have blinking dots, okay? Now if you just look at the center here, you can look at the blinking dots, you see them rotate, they stop blinking, and then it goes back to blinking dots again, right? Wrong. In fact, they were blinking the whole time. So now look at one dot on the side. Just pick a colored blinking dot and view it as it rotates. You can see that they still blink, okay? Let's try it again. Watch one of those dots as it blinks, and as it rotates, it'll blink, okay? But now if you look in the center, when it rotates, it stops blinking. Now what's happening here is this illusion shows us that our attentional system prefers to pay attention to the motion of things rather than to the color change of things. So if we look at the center of the donut and we just pay attention to the donut as a whole, when it rotates, we're paying attention to the motion aspects of the rotation, and we're not paying attention to the color changes of the dots. Whereas when we fixate one of the dots and just pay attention very hard to one of the dots, we're basically ignoring the fact that it's rotating. We're interested in just fixating that one thing, and our eyes are in fact moving as it moves, so it's not really rotating on our retinas, and we can now suppress the motion of everything else while we view. So this gives us an idea of the precedence in our brain by which circuits assign attention to specific kinds of things. So motion trumps color changes. Okay, so another aspect of color and luminance is this one. So here we have two famous painters and their self-portraits, okay? Now you can see that what matters most is the luminance and the color, because if we just take the same exact color fields in both of them and put them there, we can see that they're actually the same exact colors assigned to both pictures. Exactly the same color images on the top to both images. If I put it back now, you can see that now the colors look like they go to the right place though, right? This is your brain goofing around with you. Now, if we just swap the pictures, again, they look right, even though the colors stayed where they were. So what this tells us is that color and luminance are assigned to different jobs in the brain. So here we have a cityscape and a forest, but they have the same colors assigned to them. And if we remove them, you can see it's the same exact color image on both sides, but what's different is the luminance. And if we put them back, now you can see that they look right, okay? And if we swap them left and right, again, you'll see that the images look like they have the right color assignments, but again, that's completely false and done in your brain. Okay, so I'm going to swap back to Susana now. She's going to now take over the talk for the rest of it about cognition and illusions of cognition.
All right, so Steve has shown us a lot of different examples of spectacular illusions, and you may be wondering, why is this happening? And that's the sort of question that we ask ourselves as neuroscientists too. How does our brain deceive us? Or more generally, why do we experience illusions rather than the truth? And we and other neuroscientists are still trying to figure out a complete answer to that question, but we have a number of clues to figure it out. And one of them has to do with our brain's limitations. So our brains, even though they're the most complex organ in our body, they may be the most complex organ in nature, they're still limited by virtue of their size. They have to fit in our heads. We have a limited number of brain areas, a limited number of neurons, of connections between neurons. So that means that we have to make choices. We cannot absorb and process the infinite amount of information that surrounds us. So we're going to have to pick and choose what we consider most relevant. So we're limited, and that's where the deception comes from. We have an incomplete story, and we're trying to figure out the gaps and to make connections, sometimes correctly and sometimes not. So some of the mechanisms I already mentioned by which we end up with an illusory picture of reality is that we fill in blanks in our perception and in our cognitive processes. We seek structure even when there's not a structure to be found. Even with the reality is disorganized, we're going to seek structure and impose our own order. That's where, for instance, superstition comes from linking cause and effect incorrectly. If I I'm wearing my lucky red socks and I win at my soccer game. Well, that's obviously the red socks that did it. That's an incorrect linkage between cause and effect, seeking structure where there's none. And improving narratives, again, the stories that we tell ourselves. Our brain is a meaning-seeking device. We're constantly trying to make sense of the world around us, of our physical environment, of our social environment, our connections with other people. We're also trying to make sense of our own selves, why we act the way we do. And at all these levels, we find illusion and deception. Let me tell you a bit more about filling in blanks. And we can start with a very basic type of gap that we all have. It's a visual gap. This is the blind spot that we all have. This is where our retinas, where the optic nerve leaves our eyes to connect with the rest of our brain. We do not have photoreceptors, so we have a big hole very close to the center of our vision. So we're going to do an exercise. Don't do what the picture is saying, it's a bit wrong. Do what I demonstrate. So extend both arms, elbows completely straight, and your index fingers and thumbs in the double Lussor sign, and connect both thumbs, okay? While you're keeping both arms fully extended. Now, close your left eye and look at the tip of your left finger while paying attention to the tip of the right finger, and you should see that the right finger disappears. Keep it going. If it doesn't disappear right away, make sure that you have your arms completely straight and fingers up, and just wiggle your finger a little bit until it goes away from vision. Now, for those of you who have been able to make the finger disappear, keep it going, and tell me, can you see what's behind the finger? Yeah, do you have a big hole in your visual field, or do you see what's behind the finger? You see what's behind? No, you don't, actually. You don't have X-ray vision. What's happening is that your brain is using the information that's surrounding the area where the finger is gone, and using that information to make its best guess at what might be in the area of the finger. So it's a pretty smart algorithm, but it's not smart enough to actually reconstruct the finger. But we make these types of inferences and guesstimates all the time, not only about what we perceive, but about our thought processes as well. So this is another example of filling in the visual domain. We have here 3 patches of gray of different luminances. So we don't have a whole lot of visual information. And we may perhaps start to see some structure if we change the angle between the patches. And now, by simply adding these 3 Pac-Men, we already see the classic illusory triangle of Kanitsa. But see what happens if we keep these 3 Pac-Men in place and we vary the angle between the 3 patches of gray. Now the triangle becomes a pyramid, and it again transforms into a triangle. So with extremely limited visual information, very sparse cues, our brain is producing a very complex percept going back and forth between 2 and 3 dimensions. So we don't really need a whole lot of information out there to make up a pretty complex story. Now, I was talking about seeking structure, how we connect, oftentimes incorrectly, causes and effects, and more generally trying to impose order, even in a disorganized pattern of random noise, perceptually and cognitively. Let me give you a visual example of this process. So here we have a grid of intersections that are very well organized in the center, but they appear to be random and misaligned on the 2 flanks. Now, I'd like you to choose one of the center intersections, whichever one you want in the center patch, and fix your gaze there as precisely as you can. Keep your eyes still while paying attention to the left and right flanks, and you will see that just in a few seconds, the whole grid becomes completely organized. Your brain is imposing the order from the center and extending it into the sides. This is time-saving device and energy-saving device for the brain, because rather than having to process each individual little cross, we can just categorize it and classify it as an organized grid. So we're taking shortcuts that sometimes don't really give us a precise picture of what's out there. Finally, I want to talk about how we improve narratives. We're constantly telling ourselves stories about what's happening that may or may not recreate the reality. One example is a research paradigm that has become known as choice blindness, and it reflects the fact that we are blind to our own decisions. So as we go through our daily lives, we're making dozens, perhaps hundreds of decisions a day, if not more. Some of these decisions are important, some of them are more trivial. The researchers that did this study wanted to find out how people think about the choices that they make. So they had them look at pictures and decide, simple question, which one of the two is most attractive. So subjects in the lab would point to one of the pictures, and then the experimenters would turn both pictures down and ask the subjects to pick up the picture they just chose. What the subjects didn't know was that the experimenters had received training from a professional magician, so they had played a little bit of sleight of hand, so that when the subjects picked up the picture, they ended up with the opposite from their choice. Now, what's interesting is that in more than 1/3 of the cases, the subjects did not realize that there had been a change. So that was pretty amazing. But that was not the most impressive part of the study. The most interesting part came when, for those people who were not aware that a change had been made, the researchers asked, okay, thank you for your choice. Now, can you please tell me what made you choose that particular picture? Now, that is a trick question, of course, because the subjects had not chosen that picture. They had chosen the other one. But the experimenters wanted to find out, well, if somebody is not actually choosing something, they just think they did, are they going to justify their choices, or what are they going to do? So, sure enough, the subjects had plenty of justification for their choices. And not all of them were Trump voters. This was done a few years ago. So this subject is saying, she's radiant. I would rather have approached her at a bar than the other one. I like earrings. Now realize that the one that they actually chose had no earrings. So this is completely post hoc, right? She looks like an aunt of mine, I think, and she seems nicer than the other one. So a very sophisticated explanation. There are really no hurting for reasons to justify their choices. Yes, well, she looks very hot in this picture, so maybe not so sophisticated in this case. Just a nice shape of the face and the chin, all right? I thought she had more personality in a way. She was the most appealing to me. I don't know. That's the only honest subject, perhaps in the study. So, but this particular person is in the minority in that they cannot explain a choice. That should not surprise us because it's a choice that they didn't make. But the vast majority of the people had plenty of justification for their choices. Now, I think that this is quite interesting. Well, first, a word of hope. In a way, it doesn't matter what we decide, because sometimes we agonize over our decisions. Should I take this job? Should I leave this job? Should I marry this person? And the fact is that it doesn't matter. Because whatever we choose, we're just going to justify it to ourselves and be just as happy with the outcome. But more interesting to me as a neuroscientist is the fact that the people in this study, and by extension, all of us, we don't really know ourselves. Just as we go through our lives trying to make sense of other people's decisions, other people's actions, we do exactly the same thing to ourselves. we are interpreting our own actions in the third person. We don't think and then we act. Rather, we act and then we try to figure out why we did what we did. So that's kind of interesting. And I think also important to try to figure out both our motives in general and why it can be so hard to get somebody to change their mind even after they have made was obviously a poor decision, because we get very committed to these choices, even choices that are bad, even choices that we didn't actually make. So, all right, I think we're running out of time, but I want to, if you're more interested in, we've done a lot of studies about the neuroscience of magic here. We just hinted at a couple of things, but there's our book, Sleights of Mind, and then our latest project that we're most excited about, Champions of Illusion, about the illusion contest and its winners and finalists. And also, if you are interested in the contest itself, you can go to the contest website, it's illusionoftheyear.com, and we're gonna be having the actual contest in the first half of September this year. Anybody can vote for the winners. You just need an internet connection, and we'll be announcing the date of the voting, and and you can also participate as a contestant in future editions, and we hope you do. All right, so we'll leave it here. I don't know if we have time for questions, but otherwise we can take questions at the book signing. Thank you.